I feel like we're at a rather pivotal time when it comes to indie games. While it's true, we have had breakout successes, single developer titles like Balatro, Lethal Company and the like, deservedly performing incredibly well, more and more games are being released than ever, especially in the indie scene, and as a consequence of that, game discovery seems much more difficult overall. It's not just that though, your time is becoming increasingly valuable to AAA publishers, who are more often trying to make games to keep you playing as long as possible through predatory monetization and FOMO tactics. Seemingly every part of the industry is still trying to chase that live service golden goose, the Fortnite, the GTA Online. Even smaller titles that perform way above expectations for the developers can seem to have completely flown under the radar for most people, and I think that really is a product of just how saturated the market is with not just indie titles, but AAA as well. So to cut through the noise, in this video I just wanted to profile 5 indie titles that I found to be worth spending some time with. They're all really quite different from one another too, so I'm pretty sure you'll at least find something that you want to play here. Alrighty, let's get into it. Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom asks one fundamental question. What if Mario was a car? This is the debut title from Italian developer Panic Arcade, and despite what it might look like, this is absolutely not a driving game. This is a 3D platformer through and through, and in some ways, absolutely channels the classic collectathon style games from the 90s, your Banjo-Kazooies and Mario 64s. To me at least, the way this is structured feels very similar to Super Mario 64, and I'm sure that's intentional, as this game is clearly paying homage to that game in more ways than one. Your main form of progression involves collecting gears which are used to unlock levels, much like the stars in Super Mario 64, and the game is laser focused on its movement. What I think makes Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom the most interesting in my opinion is the fact that it's a platformer, but it doesn't have a jump button. Instead, completely relying on your ability to use the environment, ramps, ledges, and the like to get around. It's a really satisfying loop, and in a lot of instances, it's kind of begging you to break it, boosting into walls and hoping that you bounce off at just the right angle to launch you upwards. It's kind of like Mario Odyssey was in a way, not outright making you brute force its challenges, but really encouraging it, finding absurd ways to use the environment. It's really quite fun. The writing too, whilst maybe a little too tongue-in-cheek for some people, I found its absurd commitment to parodying almost every form of media it's taking inspiration from really endearing. You're playing as a wind-up car, and that's because the oil company, Tosla, and their figurehead alien Mosk is corrupting all of the oil in the land, so I guess that means the economy is in the dump. Hey, where have I seen that before? Regardless, as you're spring-powered, the corrupted oil has no effect on you. Therefore, you're obviously the only one able to put a stop to Mosk's Tosla Corporation for good. The rebellion is also figureheaded by a very round and very mustached mechanic named Morio. Yeah, it's a lot, but I found it really funny, consistently so over the game's roughly 10-hour runtime. The game is just so high energy the whole time, constantly bombarding you with high-octane situations, be it intense platforming challenges or crazy taxi-inspired sequences. The whole game is just tons of fun. And if you like platformers, this is one of the most unique and fun experiences I've had with the genre since A Hat in Time, and if you played that game, you know that's high praise. If you're familiar with this channel, you already know that I love 1000 Times Resist, and really, I'm going to use every single opportunity that I can get to talk about it. And if you're familiar with 1000 Times Resist, you'll know it could be a little bit challenging to talk about. First and foremost, why I'm recommending it. The thing I like most about smaller titles is that they often aren't beholden to the same expectations of these big budget offerings. One of the major problems with this ballooning AAA spend is that these games are so risk averse in the hope of appealing to as broad an audience as possible that they can often feel like they have nothing of interest to say. Smaller titles then are often far more interesting, as their smaller scope means that they can be about something. And 1000 Times Resist is about something. A lot of things, actually. Never before have I played a game that tackles so many ideas simultaneously, yet so confidently expresses each and every one of them without compromise. It ostensibly presents itself as a science fiction story. A pandemic struck the world in 2047 following an alien invasion, leaving every person dead except Iris, a teenage girl who discovered her immunity to the disease as the world outside was crumbling. It initially presents a tad confusing, but the eventual cascade of information, thematic brilliance, and emotional weight marked a story that I didn't just understand by the end, I felt it in my very bones. Now, I have to be clear, this is a walking sim or visual novel style game where the vast majority of the gameplay is simply moving between locations and talking to characters with a little bit of variance here and there, and if you aren't really into that, I totally get it, but the quality of the writing on display here is just so fundamentally outstanding. Play it anyway. 100%, if you appreciate this medium as the art form that it is, or you just want to experience a great story that will move you to the ends of the earth, 1000 Times Resist will not disappoint. Watch my video on it as well if you haven't, link in the description. Spilled! Is a game that launched super recently, and it's a super meditative, relaxing experience about cleaning up oil spills in a little boat, with some of the most beautiful 2D, 3D pixel art I've ever seen. The game is simple, but great. It has a really cathartic loop that scratches your brain in the same way that something like Power Wash Simulator does, but perhaps even more interesting is the story about its development. This is the debut title from Dutch solo dev Lente, who actually unironically lives on a boat, and a large portion of this game was developed on said boat. On her Kickstarter page, where the game was funded in less than 12 hours, she chronicles the story of how this game came to be and her desire to develop an eco-conscious game about ocean preservation and quitting school to make that dream a reality. I'll post a link to the page so you can have a read right underneath that like button, as well as all of the Steam pages for these games if you're interested. And yeah, this is a game that probably won't surprise you, but it's not really trying to do that. The game is about cleaning up an oil slick after a rogue corporation pollutes the waters of a small town. Its loop involves sucking up the oil with your boat and transporting it to a recycling station where you can upgrade your boat with the spoils from doing so, and this makes it easier to clean up subsequent spills. It's very simple and very easy to understand, and it's incredibly charming in that way. I'm going to be honest, this is about as cozy game as cozy games get, similar in size to something like A Short Hike. And if you're into that, what are you waiting for? This is just over $5 US. Have a nice, relaxing time out on the water. Importantly as well, Lente is donating 10 cents per sale of the game to the Whale and Dolphin Conservation Charity in the UK. A great initiative and another great reason to pick up the game. Grunt is a totally normal, unthreatening video game about tending to a garden in the Dutch countryside, where absolutely nothing out of the ordinary will take place, I swear. I had my eye on this for a little while before its release back in October last year, and I saw a Steam review calling this Gnomecore Outer Wilds, and if you know anything about Outer Wilds, you'll know that's a big call, so I picked it up and the rest is history. As such, I'm going to recommend playing this completely blind. It's about 4 hours long and bloody fantastic the whole way through, but if you need a little bit to tide you over, minor spoilers ahead. This is another solo dev project, a game by Tom van den Boogaard, inspired by the town where his father grew up. You play as a gardener, arriving in an unnamed town by bus early on Saturday morning. The owner of the property you'll be tending to is conveniently not around, leaving a note saying that he expects the garden to be finished by Monday morning, and off you go. Some of your tools are missing, and you're told specifically that under no circumstances are you to go outside at night, and when you get to work trimming the hedges and watering flowers, you'll very quickly learn that not everything is as it seems. Something is definitely wrong with the villagers, who mutter in an unintelligible language, and there's this pervasive feeling that someone is watching you. Don't even get me started on the gnomes. In reality, Grunt is only ostensibly about gardening and instead operates as a sort of time loop mystery game where certain events will only happen at specific times and your progress through the main story is entirely dependent on your understanding of the game's systems and secrets. And secrets, there are many, some that will take you a few loops to really understand, but the game's multiple endings are all incredibly interesting and definitely worth seeing. Overall, this game just has this really unique vibe to it. Another Steam review said, "It's like Outer Wilds if it took place in someone's backyard." And yeah, honestly accurate. It's obviously not as complex as Outer Wilds, but if you were looking for something that at least attempts to scratch that itch, Grunt will do just nicely. I grew up playing a lot of Guitar Hero, like a lot of Guitar Hero, and I was okay at it, nowhere near the kind of crazy shit you see online, but definitely okay. I've always loved rhythm games as well. Rhythm Heaven on the original DS is one of my favorite games of all time. So when I heard that Brace Yourself Games, the developer of Crypt of the Necrodancer, one of the most beloved rhythm-based indie titles of all time, was coming out with a sequel, sort of, I was pretty excited to say the least. And then when I heard it was forgoing the roguelike dungeon crawling in favor of a more traditional rhythm game structure, I was even more interested. And then when I heard it was a sort of hybrid between Guitar Hero and Rhythm Heaven, well, let's just say it's a match made in Rhythm Heaven. In all seriousness, after playing a few hours of Rift of the Necrodancer, I now describe it as the Great Humbler. All of the footage you'll see here is me getting absolutely destroyed because Rift of the Necrodancer is not just a Guitar Hero-like, it's also really fucking hard. It borrows from Crypt of the Necrodancer in that a lot of the game's enemies make a return, instead to the Guitar Hero style fretboard in a manner of ways. Instead of just having to keep track of their lane, certain enemies will move around in specific patterns and some have to be hit multiple times with very precise timing in order to take them down. It's an incredibly interesting spin on a genre that I feel like we haven't seen much of in a fair while. The music is also unsurprisingly excellent, nailing that sense of variety that's essential in a game of this type, while still always having that foot-tapping vibe. The game also has a medley of Rhythm Heaven-inspired mini-games to sink your teeth into, providing some relief from the often brain-numbingly challenging main songs. Seriously, if you like rhythm games at all, I highly recommend Rift of the Necrodancer. The only way I would recommend this higher was if I didn't feel like I was going to get RSI every time I play it from how brutal the level design is. So that's a profile of 5 indie games that I've played recently, and I absolutely adore every single one of them. What I think the most important thing that all of these games have in common is that they're not fighting for your attention. There are no daily missions, there are no predatory monetization tactics. Every single one of these games is just a good-ass video game at a fair price. That is the value of indie titles, something I feel we've lost sight of as a community in the past few years. I think it's great though that there is still a wealth of excellent indie titles releasing every single year, even if it's a little harder for them to get discovered, which is what I hope I was able to help with at least a little bit with this video. Now, I obviously don't have time to play every single game ever, so if there's something you've played recently that you feel has gone under the radar, or it's just a damn good time, drop it in the comments. I want to know what you guys have been playing, and maybe someone will find something they really love because of it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next one.